Hello everyone, hope you're all safe and sound. So this week's biology lesson is a continuation of what we started before all of this, before schools being suspended and everything else. So chapter 6, reactions to environment and nervous activities. Open your books to pages 116 and 117 and please follow. The images are obvious on your books. Activity 4 is about the structure of the brain. Remember, we said that our nervous system consists of the brain, spinal cord, and the nerves, okay? So today we're talking about the brain. You could see that in document A, this is a human brain. Yes, it looks like that. So the human brain is made up of three different parts, okay? The most prominent one, or the most obvious one, is known as the cerebrum, and it is in fact the frontal part. This is the front part of your brain. The back part is number 2, or the cerebellum, and number 3, finally, the medulla oblongata. Okay, this is the smallest part of the brain, but you don't need to know that. What you need to really know is that the largest part of the brain is the cerebrum. God. Okay, we move on to document B, which is an image obtained by MRI, or magnetic resonance image. The MRI shows us that the brain is protected by the skull, which is bone, okay? In addition to that, it just proves that the cerebrum, again, is the largest part of the brain, and it shows us that the medulla oblongata is connected directly to the spinal cord. Moving on to the next slide. So over here, we're talking about the cerebrum in specific, the organ of control of numerous sensory functions. So everything we sense from the outside world is controlled in the cerebrum, in the largest part of the brain. Okay, so the cerebrum is divided into two hemispheres, or two parts, the left and the right. And the outer layer of the brain, as you could see in the picture, is made up of gray matter, and it's known as the cerebral cortex. Okay, the gray matter contains only cell bodies of neurons. If you look at the cerebrum, you will see that it is made up of many folds. So hold a paper in your hand and fold it. These are the folds of the brain. It doesn't look exactly like the paper you fold it, but you get the definition of the word fold now. These folds are known as convolutions, okay? So what do we call them in biology? We call them convolutions. This is really weird. I'm trying to explain over the net. Okay. So you could see that the cerebrum is divided into several regions. You've got the orange region, which is the area of tactile sensation or touching. It receives, and remember, receives only all information that has to do with touching. So if you touch something hot, what receives it? The cerebrum. And what part of the cerebrum? The orange area you see on your on document C. Document C, yeah, it's document C. And then you've got the auditory area that has to do with the sound messages. You've got the visual area, which has to do with the observation, seeing stuff. You've got the olfactory, the smell and taste. So each part of the brain, or the cerebrum, is responsible for receiving different kinds of information. What are the rest of the parts for? Well, I will tell you something, that the rest of the parts of the cerebrum could have to do with long-term memory, short-term memory. Okay? For example, you could research it if you want. Let's continue from there. So we know that the grooves determine large regions or lobes. Each lobe, or each part, is a lobe, okay? We've got the temporal lobe, we've got the occipital lobe, we've got the parietal lobe, and the frontal lobe. So the names are according to their presence, okay? So the frontal lobe is present at the front. The occipital lobe at the very end. The temporal lobe, it has to connect with the temple, or the human being, like. Again, the lobes are named according to their positions. Each lobe controls a specific body activity. So in each lobe, we have a different body activity. We're moving on to the next slide. How do we know that this lobe is responsible for that activity, for the motor activity, for example, or that lobe is responsible for the sounds, for receiving sounds, another lobe. This is done by medical imagery, or what's known as scintigraphy. Okay, so they take an image of the brain do while the person is doing something specific. Look at document D. We've got 1 and 2. The first one is while a person is sleeping. The second one is while a person, let me read it, is observing or seeing an object. So green and blue color says that there is no activity occurring, or a very weak activity. Okay, I'm gonna tell you in a minute how they know that this is green and this is blue, or how this integraphy thing work. And then red, yellow, white, pink, they all mean that there is heavy blood flow, or very active parts of the brain, or the cerebrum again. Okay, so how does this work? The machine itself measures the blood flow, how much blood is going to that specific region. So when you're observing something, the blood flow to that area, or to the visual region that receives visual sensations, is very active. It needs a lot of blood, so the body sends a lot of blood to that area. So we have heavy blood flow there. And this is how the scintigraphy is done, by measuring how much blood is in each specific area. This is why at the beginning, when the brain is at rest or sleeping, there is very weak activity, because the brain is resting. You're not observing, you're not listening to anything, your brain is not working, you're not thinking, you're not touching anything. Okay, but in the second part, where you're observing, where the person is observing an object or seeing it, most probably the parts that are lighted or have heavy blood flow are the areas that have to do with the visual sensations. Okay, so that's it for this lesson. This is the glossary. If you want, we could read it together. Let's read it together. So the brain is a set of nervous centers located in the skull. The nervous centers are the cerebrum, cerebellum, and medulla oblongata. The cerebrum is the anterior part, anterior meaning the front, okay, of the brain, made up of two cerebral hemispheres, the left and the right. The cerebellum is the posterior part, or the back part of the brain, which helps maintain balance. So what's the job of cerebellum? To maintain balance, so you could walk properly, for example. The medulla oblongata is the part of the brain which commands many functions, such as the reflex or of salvation. Okay, so it commands functions. This is all I want you to know. The MRI and the scintigraphy, they're both techniques to explore the brain. So the main points that we took in this activity is that the perception of the environment is elaborated in the cerebral cortex and activates well-localized cerebral area. So depending on what's happening in the environment, a specific cerebral area will be active. Let's imagine, God forbid again, that a specific cerebral area was damaged for some reason. The function of the human being that has to do with that specific area will be also destroyed, because we can't have another cerebral area taking over. So each cerebral area is specific to a specific function, like what we saw at the beginning. The visual area is specific to seeing objects. The auditory area is specific for the noise, for the sounds, for receiving sound. So if the auditory area was damaged, the person would have troubles with hearing. Complex techniques of cerebral imagery measure the blood flow in the cerebral cortex, like the scintigraphy and the MRI.